Hey everyone, Mel here. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about the dangers of not being yourself in a relationship, a warning for codependents. Now what I mean by this is that there's something that every codependent does in a relationship that seems like a good idea at the time but ends up working against you. And that is the ability to really empathize and see what the partner needs, and then not being ourselves, being what we think the other person needs, what they think is our best version of ourselves. What makes a codependent person stand out is that they tend to be people pleasers, just a bit too nice, caretakers. Maybe they were the caretakers of their family, and it's normally family trauma that's caused them to become this way. Maybe they've had to look after their parents or siblings from a young age and had to be an adult. The thing about codependency is that you can develop these traits quite simply from experiencing family trauma, or from even having a family member who's got a personality disorder, like having a borderline or a narcissistic mum, or even worse, if both parents are disordered. It can mean that the child grows up as codependent. Now, what this means is that the child is actually really empathic, is sensitive, likes to put the needs of others ahead of theirs, because that's how they've learnt to survive. All our defense mechanisms built from a young age simply to help us to survive. The worst thing that a child could experience is the threat of abandonment, of rejection, of being alone, and of not feeling safe. These are all cool things that our egos have created, these defense mechanisms, so that a child doesn't have to experience this. Now, as adults, we can actually experience this and still not be fragmented. Most of us anyway, we can experience periods of terror, of anguish, of grief. Now, for a child whose sense of self and ego hasn't built up yet, it's still very fragile, and the child is still vulnerable. They're vulnerable to completely just dissociating and splitting. And you often find children who've experienced intense sexual trauma have developed dissociative identity disorder. So that's an extreme example, and thankfully most of us haven't experienced that. But even just the experience of having not good enough parenting, or just things that happened were out of your parents' control, this is enough for us to build defense mechanisms. Now, for some, they might develop a personality disorder, and for others, it can be developing codependent traits that serve to protect us. This is where I relate to. See, in my family, my parents were constantly arguing. I'd never known them to be happy since the day I was born. And I couldn't stand the feelings of anxiety when I was always hearing people just shouting. It just made the area I lived in, my home, it felt unsafe. And I didn't know how to approach my mum. Sometimes she was really angry and I would be scared of her. So I'd have to kind of figure out what her mood was like, what her vibe was. Maybe it was I was simply born more naturally psychic, more sensitive, more empathic, or maybe it was the result of childhood trauma, which as a coping mechanism, I learned how to be more empathic, in the sense that I could be able to sense the feelings of my mum or my dad and be able to act accordingly so that they would feel better. And as a result, I would feel better because I wouldn't have to deal with all this anxiety in my stomach, and I knew that there won't be shouting coming anymore. Now, I'm going to bring this to adults and codependents, and how actually this can serve against them in a relationship. Now, all of us want to show off our best sides when we're getting to know someone. When we're starting out in a romantic relationship and it's someone that they don't know us, they don't know our past, they haven't heard any stories about us, it's a fresh page. And so, it's natural we want to put on our best side. We're not going to share with them stories that might make them think wrongly of us. We're not going to tell them of bad things that we've done or anything we've regretted in the past. No, we're going to be our best selves. A bit like a job interview, really. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with trying to be your best self. I mean, that's something that I tried to live by as a counsellor and a coach. But there's a problem in that with codependents who are really skilled in empathy and are able to really experience what it's like for someone else and feel their emotions and get a sense of what they're thinking, to be able to then think, that's what that person likes, I'm going to be more like that. Or she's showing signs that she doesn't like this side of me, so I'm not going to be like that. And then over a time, we just build up this identity of this false self, this self that we think that she's going to really like. But there's going to be a point when you're going to have to you're going to be yourself, whether that's just being you, messing up, because hey, we all mess up, we're human. And she's going to eventually see that you're not 100% the person that you've made yourself out to be. So for those of you who can admit, and I put my hand here, I've done this in the past, those of us who can admit that, yeah, we haven't been honest in the beginning stage of a relationship, we've given them the idea that we're someone that we're not. Can you see that there's actually a danger in this, in that you're going to show your real face sometime, they're going to see the real you. Now, the next question I want to ask for you, for those who can relate to not showing your true self when you're in a relationship, is there fear behind it? What are you scared of? What will happen if she did see the sides of you that you're not willing to show her? Now, oftentimes with people with codependency, it's all childhood trauma, and it comes from a primary caregiver like a mum or a dad. Every child wants and needs good mirroring from their primary caregivers, their mum, their dad, that when they've done something that it's shown to them that, yes, well done. They need that sense of feeding back to them how great they are. Children that didn't get good enough mirroring from their primary caregivers like mum or dad might end up believing that they're just not good enough for whatever reason, that their parent wasn't giving them the attention or was abusing them or was being neglectful. The young child just can't understand from an adult's point of view why the parent couldn't be available. So instead, the child interprets this as, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy of love, there's something wrong with me. Of course, a child's going to blame itself. It's just what children do. They don't have the same capacity for us to reflect on our experiences and make peace with it. For them, so often they will develop ego defense mechanisms as a way to protect them from feeling like shit. Every child just fears being alone, fears abandonment and rejection. And this is why you find with people with borderline personality, for example, where they are frozen at an adolescent phase in this psychological development, that they're still stuck in this fear of abandonment and terror. And it's not that different with the codependent person. Again, there's fear driving him or herself in that I'm not lovable, so if I behave or do this or please this person in my life, then they'll be happy and I'll feel loved. And it's that driving force and the ability to empathize to such an extent that can actually be quite detrimental for a codependent person in a relationship. Wanting to put someone's needs automatically before your own is just an invitation for someone with narcissism or someone with borderline personality disorder, because they're looking for resources. With a borderline example, it'll be sympathy resources. They want someone to give them the sympathy, to make them the center of their world. So you're open and you're willing to give your resources to whomever to put their needs before yours. And then with the codependent, the ability to empathize to such an extent that even though you're feeling like crap, even though she's mistreating you or he's mistreating you, it's okay because you can empathize with how he or she feels. And if she feels better by you changing, then you'll feel better. And this can spell disaster for someone with codependent traits. This is how you can sabotage relationships. And it's often the pain and the suffering after a breakup with someone. For someone who is codependent, this can be especially traumatic and you can really sitting there with your shame. And as a result, want to jump into another relationship, and that almost neediness can be picked up by a potential partner. And in turn, you're going to be just easygoing for people with personality disorders. You are just ripe for the picking, and your own inner desire to feel better, to feel loved, is what's going to be a blind spot in spotting these people. So obviously empathy is a good thing. If none of us had empathy to an extent, then we'd all be going around murdering, killing, raping each other. Society will crumble. Everyone would essentially be a psychopath, and that would be the norm. So no, we obviously do need empathy for social cohesion. However, too much empathy, being too empathic, can actually be a hindrance. So what's needed here is to actually take a good hard look at yourself and ask, do I put other people's needs before mine all the time? Do I always prioritize people? Do I like to caregive? I know I can relate to this in the past. It's most likely what drew me to becoming a counsellor. And to be able to know this within yourself and not judge or shame yourself for having these traits, there's nothing wrong with it. It's about having this awareness is then going to make us realize, actually, I need to put boundaries if I want to maintain healthy relationships. Because people who are just a bit too nice, even though they're genuine in wanting to help others, they end up just being trampled on, walked all over like a doormat by people who just don't care. So you need to learn how to build boundaries. And that comes, again, from just what I said, by realizing within yourself if you have the tendency to just let boundaries drop. And the thing about with borderlines and narcissists is they also don't have boundaries as well, especially borderline person. She doesn't know boundaries, so she's going to want to look for someone who also doesn't know boundaries. And this is just codependent relationships end up just draining you to the extent where it can just make you ill, make you feel worse off than when you started. It's not healthy. What is healthy is knowing how to hold healthy boundaries in a relationship. And just a quick side note on empathy. A lot of literature, and if you go online, and you will often find people saying that borderlines and narcissists don't have any empathy. I wouldn't say that's entirely true. They do need a certain extent of empathy to be able to suss out how the partner is feeling so that they can then manipulate them and get what they want. So for example, a narcissist may try and suss out how you're feeling and what you might be thinking based on past events, and to be able to use that sense of empathy and then think, okay, how can I manipulate this person so I can get what I want for him or her? Perhaps we can say the same about the codependent. Is it not a form of manipulation by putting someone else's needs, prioritizing, doing everything for them to make them happy so they'll stay in a relationship with you? Is that not, even though it's well-meaning, still not a form of manipulation? No one's perfect. And I talk a lot about recovery from people with personality disorders, but often people who are attracted to those are often wounded in the same way. So that's it for today. I'm going to wrap this up, but for more information on the work that I do, I specialize in helping people recover from abusive and traumatic relationships. I offer online coaching, and I have products on my website to help you recover quicker and sooner and emerge stronger from a painful relationship. Check it out, thegothcoach.com. I'll see you next time.